slide presentation is here.
Oh, no.
And there's no computer.
Oh.
My bad. So anyway, Herman said I could talk about anything I like, and I don't really talk about myself that much. I think I'm less interesting than perhaps my kids and grandkids, but a little bit about myself. I was born in East St. Louis. That's across the river from St. Louis. And you know, Ross Perot passed away yesterday, and I realized that he and I have a lot in common. He was born on the other side of the Arkansas mountains, became Eagle Scout, went to college, was a naval officer, and the IBM salesman, and after that our paths go differently.
Right.
But another thing that we had in common, and that is, you know, I graduated, you know, third in my class of 100 or something. I wasn't smarter than the other 97, but like Ross Perot, he had more persistence rather than intelligence. So that's what got him ahead. So I guess I needed more persistence, or maybe less intelligence, I don't know. But yeah, I get in, and I think many years ago I talked a little bit about East St. Louis. That would be a subject of a speech in itself. It's the only town that I know of in this country that started out, you know, it was a very successful industrial town with railroads and meat packing and iron, steel fabrication, aluminum, rubber production, etc. And now it is a decayed city with no tax base. I went to see the house that I grew up in. I couldn't find it because it's like a jungle. There's no houses on that side of the street. There's like one house on the other side of the street. The street's not paved. Anyway, it's a very interesting story how it went from one to the other. And yeah, we can leave it at that. Skipping to my next generation, I have two daughters. Michelle, who lives here in Mill Valley, is an accomplished environmental engineer with a national reputation in her field. And she did her undergraduate at Harvard and then her master's at Berkeley in environmental engineering. She is a wetland restoration practitioner. Her expertise is tidal wetlands. So she was involved in, her company was involved in the Crissy Fields restoration. There was a restoration in Mill Valley, I don't know, it was Miller Creek or whatever it is that she was involved in. What's the other one? Hamilton Field.
Hamilton Field,
Yeah. And then the South Bay salt pond restorations. You know, just south of the airport, we used to see salt ponds. That's now marsh. And I remember when she was pitching that product to the decision makers, and she was going up against Dianne Feinstein's husband's company. I said, Michelle, get real. There's no way that you're going to win that against Dianne Feinstein's husband's company. Well, she did. She won that project for her company. And I was, when I was in Hong Kong, I was back here for a brief stay, and I was at some event, I forget what it was, and I wound up talking to the guy across the aisle, and somehow the salt pond project came up. And they said, oh yeah, my daughter was the one that won that bid. She's in charge of that project. Well, the guy was the controller for Dianne Feinstein's husband's company. So he knew all about it. So she's authored numerous conference papers and peer-reviewed publications, et cetera, et cetera. And she was appointed after the Katrina flooding in New Orleans. She was appointed on a committee by Congress to talk about planning to develop wetlands so that wouldn't happen again. And basically, the committee's job was kind of to supervise the Army Corps of Engineers and get them going in the right direction. And a couple years ago, there was a ballot, a measure on the ballot here in Marin about, was it Save the Bay, or I can't remember what it was, but you may have seen her. She was in the TV commercial promoting passage of that proposition, which it did pass, by the way. Her husband, Steve, aka Dr. Crooks, is a Brit with a PhD in sedimentology from the University of Reading. You know, he often says if he hadn't changed jobs, which actually changed jobs and came to America because of my daughter, to marry my daughter, he would have been on the team that won a Nobel Prize later for the work in their field. So anyway, he's an interesting chap, travels a lot. We tease him about, you know, he's, you know, all his travels, his carbon footprint is greater than what he's trying to say, but he's big in the carbon sequestration field. And he was just appointed as a research associate for the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. So quite an accomplishment. And he has his own firm now. In fact, both my daughter and my son-in-law would be have very interesting topics they could talk about here at one of our meetings. And Steve is volunteer, but my daughter just can't get up at that time in the morning. So I can't convince her. I said, all you have to do is just once, you know, I'm not trying to get you to join Rotary. But one time, she just can't get up at 7.
Why don't we just don't let her go to sleep that day?
Yeah.
Why
So-
don't we go to her house?
See, my other daughter has had success in raising a family at 7,300 feet elevation in Salida, Colorado. She has a discipline to train at that altitude and weather. She'll run at 5 below in the morning in the winter when it's pitch black. She's done several marathons and is currently training to run the rim to rim to rim of the Grand Canyon.
Gee.
That's 50 miles, 4,000 feet down, 4,000 feet up
God.
twice. So that's what she's training on, but she started fudging a little bit. She said, I may just do the rim to rim because I'm not getting the training in that I need. So, but anyway, that's what she's up there. Her husband is a local attorney in Salida, and you know, they've been accumulating property, and they now have a house on the Arkansas River where they met as whitewater river guides. And so they have a raft, they have kayaks, they have boogie boards or whatever it is, and they can just put in right on their property and go downstream. And my granddaughter is actually sort of a river rat. She gets on her boogie board and floats downstream, and then they have these kayak holes right in town. They built them, and people go out there in little kayaks and spin and flip and do all these things and tricks. So she'll get out there in her boogie board and do things on her boogie board. So she. My present to her at Christmas was a new wetsuit because she wore out the other one. So, and my grandson Wiley just joined the Army. He's 17 years old. We couldn't talk him out of it. I'm Navy. My uncle's Navy. My grandfather, I think he was Army. My brother was Air Force. He went Army. Couldn't talk him out of it, but. It's interesting why he chose to go in the Army. He just wasn't ready for college. He didn't even enjoy high school. He would study the material and satisfy himself that he knew it, but just couldn't bother with homework. He'd do the homework just to prove that he did it, but turning it in was like incidental. Passing tests, it's like, it wasn't important. So, very bright kid. He was captain of the Knowledge Bowl team, which is like the old College Bowl, if anybody remembers that. You compete in sort of a quiz show format, and they took 3rd place in the state, and actually 1st place for small schools where he comes from. So, he's not dumb. He scored in the 98th percentile on his SATs, but just not interested in college. So he's joined the Army, and before you join the Armed Forces, you have to take a test. It's called the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. And so he was practicing for it, and I said, how's it going? He said, well, I got an 82. I said, Wiley, that's not very good for you. He says, yeah, but they had stuff like automobile mechanics and electrical work. He said, I don't know that stuff. Well, anyway, when he took the aptitude test for real, he scored so high that they made him take it again because they thought it was either lucky or he cheated.
Oh my God.
So he took it again and got a higher score. So I'm hoping they pluck him out of the infantry and put him in West Point or something like that.
Yeah.
We'll see. And he's been fast tracked to go into Special Forces, which is the scary part because they're in wars in countries that we don't even know exist sometimes. So, and I got a great photo of him his first week in boot camp. He's rappelling down this wall. You can't quite see what he's rappelling down from. But it's interesting. He's 6'4", good-looking kid. Got it from somewhere else. And he's in his uniform. It's obviously brand new. It looks like it's never been washed. It's not dirty, and it looks like a stock photo for recruiting people into the Army. I mean, that's what it looks like. Like he came from, what do you call it, Central Casting or something like that. So it's a real cool photo that I have to show another time. So, I guess one last thing, my granddaughter is into cross-country, as was my grandson, and of course my daughter runs a lot. And she recently competed in what's called a run-up, slide a mountain and back, and got first place in that among people under the age of 30 or something like that. And she's just graduated from high school. She's going to be in the cross-country team there, and she's been training, during the summer. And in fact, she's coming out here next week, but she says, "Dad, or Grandpa, I have to have time to run. I need to get my runs in." So she gets that after her mother, I guess. So anyway, I'll end it there. One thing I guess I just like to say in terms of kind of thinking of what Herman was going to talk about. What I do, I'm an energy efficiency consultant, and what that means, and it's for commercial buildings and multifamily buildings. And most of that is doing what's called energy benchmark or energy audits. And energy benchmarks are now required by the state for buildings over 50,000 square feet. And the city of San Francisco and San Jose and LA have benchmarking requirements for buildings much smaller. So basically, yeah, I'm an energy efficiency consultant, but most of it is benchmarking buildings for people. So they can measure their building against other buildings on a national basis.
How do you get your business, Chuck?
Right now, my website, and it's doing very well when LA introduced their law, and took effect this year, but it's sort of dropped off now, so I got to augment that with more outreach. But